Thank you, Shirley. It's always great to start off the day with a keynote. I'm hoping that all the caffeine that you've consumed over the last hour has kicked in and that you're going to stay awake for most of this presentation. It's a real pleasure to be here. I want to acknowledge the welcome from the chief, and we are on the traditional lands of the Click Lake today, and it kind of sets the stage, I think, for what we'll talk about today, which is a glimpse into the future, a little discussion around the opportunity. Our natural resources sector in British Columbia is exceptionally well positioned, and hopefully we can go through sort of three things today. One, I'd like to talk about data as the new core asset. Secondly, I'd like to talk a little bit about digital transformation and what it means for companies in driving competitive advantage. And the third thing I'd like to talk about is what does a supercluster do in helping us to accelerate and achieve those outcomes. So, let's start with the question that I'm often asked. Can I flip to the slides, please? All right. So, at 10 o'clock in the morning, the key question for all you astrophysicists is, what is a supercluster? So, if you look up supercluster on Wikipedia, here's what it says. It says, a supercluster is a large group of smaller galaxy clusters or galaxy groups as among the largest known structures of the cosmos. Okay, that's not what we're talking about today, but if I bring it a little bit back closer to Earth, this is what we mean by superclusters. In our context, it really is about a dense area of business activity containing a critical mass of large and small companies connected to post-secondary research institutions, other innovation actors, and folks that are actually all working towards similar goals. And it's about building proximity and connections that can result in supply chain benefits, encourage knowledge sharing, collaboration, drive competitive and business advantage, and ultimately spur the onset of more anchor companies and more investment in the region. So, I think the federal government's program here was particularly bold in its ambition. It's about a $950 million investment that is being leveraged by more than 2 to 1 by private sector investors. And in British Columbia, we have one of 5 superclusters. So ours is the digital technology superclusters. You can see the other superclusters across the country. As Shirley mentioned, at the BC Tech Summit in March, you'll have the opportunity to come in and see some of those other superclusters in action. Why we're excited about the digital technology supercluster is that we've already assembled a collaboration of over 500 organizations. It's a groundswell that actually can help us to really define the next generation of capabilities that we have in BC. And we've already seen commitment levels that exceed $360 million of investments that will go towards the kind of research and innovation projects that can help to define that next generation. So you might ask the question, why a digital technology supercluster? I think most of us have kind of been avid readers of what's happening broadly around the economic shifting sands. We are undergoing what often is referred to as the 4th industrial revolution. You know, it's essentially a wave of technological advancement that's in many ways unprecedented in its scale, scope, and speed, and the impact that we're all going to feel over the next couple of decades. Really, a lot of this is fueled by the sheer volume of data that's being created. And the result is the rise of digital technology really as the cornerstone of this transformation process. I'll share a couple of facts with you. So there's been more data that's been created in the past 2 years than in the entirety of the previous history of the human race. That's an amazing amount of data. By 2020, at the end of this decade, there's going to be about 1.7 megabytes of new information that's created every second for every human being on this planet. Within 5 years, there's going to be over 50 billion smart connected devices in the world, all with the aim of collecting, analyzing, and sharing data. But amazingly, if you actually look at the data that's aggregated, less than 0.5% of all this data is actually analyzed or even acted upon. So that represents a tremendous opportunity as we kind of embark on the next era. So many of you have probably seen this. Data is the new oil. There's no question that data is going to be that new commodity that we have the opportunity to do a few things with. One, just like oil, we need to find it, we need to extract it, we need to refine it, we need to distribute it, We need to find ways to monetize it. And this is what represents the opportunity for BC and Canada. Extracting, refining, distributing, monetizing data, it's really about leveraging the core technology capabilities that's been building up here in the province for the last 20 years. We're already among the world's leaders in some of the emerging fields around data analytics, around areas like quantum computing, around things like augmented and virtual reality, blockchain technologies, Internet of Things, and in the genomics and precision health area. We're also part of one of the most vibrant technology sectors on the planet. Our linkage to the Cascadia Innovation Corridor and the connection to some of the biggest cloud companies in that corridor is going to lead to density and opportunity. There's an unmistakable opportunity for us to really harness the power of data to really garner economic advantage for us for years to come. So let me talk a little bit about digital transformation. I think it's on the top of mind for most business leaders nowadays, and I know, having had the opportunity to work with a number of executives within the resource industry, this is the talk within your boardrooms. So for companies and industries across the board, the imperative is to figure out how you can harness data for competitive advantage, and using digital technology is having a system-wide impact across industries, and it's all these elements of collecting, analyzing, visualizing, and acting upon that data. It's making existing industries more productive and sustainable, and it's also creating entirely new industries at the same time. So I think for the most part, Canadian BC companies recognize that they need to embrace this, and the question is, how can they do this in a accelerated and collaborative approach? So that brings us to the Supercluster. The Supercluster is really a program that recognizes that the status quo is probably not going to be sufficient. The entire world is moving very quickly around adopting digital technologies, and many of these things are going to transform the landscape of industry. So the Supercluster was created specifically to harness some of these core capabilities that I just mentioned and connect existing companies and large resource companies with the innovators that are already indigenous here in our province. So there's really 4 primary strategic objectives. One is to continue to build up the base of globally competitive companies. The secondly is to increase and enhance those linkages, the partnerships and alliances that have already come to define how we operate in British Columbia. The third is to increase the breadth and diversity of talent. And ultimately, the fourth is to scale up more small and medium-sized enterprises. Let me maybe give some examples about what's happening. I think for all the folks that are from the forestry industry, this is probably a very familiar slide. Digital technology is ultimately revolutionizing industries like forestry. And there's a term that's the buzz around precision forestry. Precision forestry is really enabled by a wide range of emerging technologies, such as drones, unmanned UAVs, laser scanning and LiDAR technologies, earth observation, satellite information, even soil sensors. So this is more than just about adopting digital technology. It's actually, for forest managers, it involves a paradigm shift from what traditionally was a very manual and analog system to really a system where you've got digital data capture, you've got the ability to plan, you've got the ability to go very granular in your understanding of things, and to really kind of manage more efficiently both the operations and the planning aspects. So we're really pleased to say that we've been working with a number of anchor companies within sort of our supercluster. And one of the projects in development right now in the supercluster is a project that's called the Forest Machine Connectivity Project. Now, it's really about modernizing the timber harvesting and supply chain to capture productivity data using industrial Internet of Things platforms to really store, analyze, and visualize operational data. Let me unpack that a little bit. It's a project that's being led by Canfor and Timber West, and it's in collaboration with FP Innovations and UBC's Faculty of Forestry. They've come together to modernize the timber harvesting supply chain. And it really will deliver the first and only application to solve the technical barriers that impact the efficiency of the supply chain. And how it's going to work is it's going to use industrial Internet of Things platform, which is really a network of smart devices on various machine and equipment that can monitor, collect, exchange, and analyze, deliver valuable insights. The insights and data delivered can allow contractors, machine operators, forest managers to identify bottlenecks, improve productivity, develop best practices throughout the supply chain. And so we see this as an important step in the digital transformation of not only forestry companies in BC, but ultimately all of Canada, and ensure that we remain globally competitive. And you know, another example is digital transformation is also revolutionizing industries like mining. You know, mining companies have always been driven by productivity, and digital technology just takes this drive to a whole new level. So it allows them to simulate mine operations, improve design, enhance safety, improve efficiency. And I think that the latest stat is that 40% of mining companies will invest in virtual reality and artificial intelligence during the production phase in the next 3 to 5 years. So I'll give you an example of a project that we're pretty excited about as well, which has to do with how you can aggregate information around the land base to drive better decision making. So another project in development we have is called the Earth Data Store. And so, you know, the Earth Data Store is ultimately about delivering geographic, geospatial analytics, information and services to drive better decision making and management of the land base and our resources. And you know, if I give a little bit of context here, Canada as a nation is defined by our landscape and the wealth of vast resources around forests, fields, agricultural lands, mines, but there's also forbidding obstacles to how we manage and harvest this wealth. Geographic information for many folks who do planning in this area is a lifeblood of making those decisions. Now, the remote sensing sector and all the information that's been accumulated over the years, it's really poised for huge growth. What's needed here is an ability to aggregate that information so you can look across it in ways that you couldn't before. So the value created here will substantially, you know, create sort of new insights, new opportunities, and overcome some of the bottlenecks that we see today. And it'll use technologies like cloud computing and artificial intelligence to create this. And there's going to be huge ramifications for virtually every industry that's working on the land base. We hope that it'll help to spur on more innovations in the agricultural sector, in the forestry sector, in the mining sector, the energy sector, virtually every sector that has to do with the land. So a little bit about our supercluster, and I just highlighted a few of the companies that are part of the membership. As I mentioned, there's over 500 organizations that are now part of the supercluster, and some of the names are very familiar to you. In the natural resources side, what was really important is that we have anchor organizations who are committed to working alongside technology companies to develop and deploy the kind of technology innovations that are going to digitally transform their organizations. So you'll see on this map, we've got Canfor, Tech Resources, Timber West, emerging companies like Terramera in the agricultural space, and Hatch. And this is all supported by companies small to large, from startups to large companies on the technology side, you know, startup and emerging companies like Lamazoo, you know, large companies like Microsoft, we've got quantum computing companies like D-Wave, and across all of this is connections to our leading post-secondary institutions here. Right here in Prince George is a connection to the UNBC, but you see that we have a network of 6 of the post-secondary institutions here listed, but we actually have a relationship with all 25 post-secondary institutions across all of BC, which we're particularly excited about. So the question is, how does it work? What is involved in being part of the supercluster? Really, it is a platform for us to facilitate collaboration among small, large companies, from startups to SMEs, to incorporate sort of the excellence that we have in research organizations and post-secondary, and then ultimately to be able to drive the outcomes through true adopters and customers on the other end of things. It's ultimately up to the members to propose the projects. The projects are evaluated and selected based on really the opportunity to scale this on a much more substantial basis. And what we do as a supercluster is we have funds allotted to co-invest in these ambitious projects and undertakings. So ultimately, it's an open opportunity for any of your organizations to get involved. You can come to our website and you can join the Supercluster. You can explore what it looks like to participate in ideation sessions with us, to engage in project development. We believe that there is power to community. There's power to building collaboration amongst those that can actually build a better outcome. And let me close with the three things I started with. Number one, I think data will become and is becoming the core asset for every organization. The digital transformation revolution is here. It's here today. How everyone adapts to it is really up to you, but I think it's a fundamental piece that has to be solved. And the third element is that the Supercluster is really a tool. It's a platform. It's an opportunity for you to accelerate the plans that you have around digital transformation, to connect with stakeholders that are here with you in British Columbia, and really drive out outcomes at a faster pace. And with that, I want to thank you for your time today.